part of my job is education. So in order for students to learn, or people to learn, you say one thing and you repeat it again. So I'm going to just share with you the levels of government and what they do, and then I'll give you a bit of a wrap-up. So the federal government, as Kyle stated, this level of government deals with areas of law that are listed in our Constitution of 1867 and generally affects our whole country, such as it looks at issues like national defense, foreign affairs, banking, employment insurance, federal taxes, the post office, fisheries, shipping railways, telephone pipelines, indigenous land rights, and criminal law. The provincial, at the provincial level, we have, again, it's related to the Constitution Act. In each of our 10 provinces, the provincial government is responsible for education, healthcare, some natural resources, and road regulations. Sometimes they share responsibility, as Kyle did say, with the federal government. The 3 territories have their own governments, and they're responsible. Responsibilities are given to them by the federal governments. The federal government tries to make things fairer among provinces through equalization payments. So extra money is given to provinces that are less wealthy. The federal government tries to make sure the standards of health, education, and welfare are the same for every Canadian. In the same way that it lists the powers of the federal government, the Constitution Act of 1867 lists the powers of the provinces, including direct taxes, hospitals, prisons, education, marriage, property, and civil rights. The Act also says that the power over agriculture and immigration should be shared between the federal and the provincial governments. At the municipal level, it's usually based in city, town, and district, or municipalities. Municipal governments are responsible for areas such as libraries, parks, community water systems, local police, roadways, and parking. They receive authority for these areas from the provincial governments. So across the country, there are also band councils, which govern First Nations communities. These elected councils make decisions that affect their local communities. I believe that there should be cooperation, open communication, and collaboration in governments, which in effect builds the kinds of relationships that will help the country to thrive and grow. Then we have the uniqueness of Dufferin County with 8 lower tier governments, each with its own special and individual needs. The key is balancing the needs of the government and ensuring people are receiving the right service at the right time and the right place.
Thank you very much. We've kind of categorized the questions, and most of them are coming in energy, environment. There's a bunch that we passed under others, some human rights and immigration. So I'm going to try to pick questions from all of the buckets of obvious interest. And there is a fair amount of duplication, so we'll just move on. This one is, it has to do with healthcare, which really, as we've discussed, is more of a provincial issue than a federal issue. But is there any way that you see the federal government being able to impact wait times for surgery for people?
This is 90 seconds?
160.
60.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And is anybody would like to take the question?
I'll take it.
Okay. And then everyone will have a chance.
And we'll just go down.
Yeah.
We'll keep it in the same order, sounds good?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So right now, there's the transfer that happens right from the federal government to the provinces in regards to healthcare. What the People's Party of Canada want to do is we want to give the provinces back their GST. It's going to equate to about the same annually to the provinces, but it's going to allow the provinces to control their own money. They're not going to be on a welfare state. They will be able to disperse these taxes any way they want, primarily for healthcare. If they decide to drop those taxes, if healthcare is doing good, that's up to the MPPs that you guys elect. Or if they decide if they need to build more hospitals and they decide to raise the taxes, well, that's up to the MPPs that you guys elect. Right now, we've created sort of a welfare state whenever it comes to the healthcare, where they're relying on the transfer from the federal government with no guarantee of who's getting what. With having the GST, it's going to allow the provinces to make their own money.
So I gotta disagree a little bit with Chad. I believe we are a federal nation, and the point of the Canada Health Transfer is so that you have similar services in similar provinces. So you don't end up, for example, in PEI, you can't see, there's no access to neurology, where in Ontario you can get. That's what the Canada Health Transfer is designed for through the Canada Health Act, to make sure you have similar services, health services across the country. So I don't want to devolve that to the provinces, because then we're going to end up with a patchwork of care, right? First of all, Ontario is going to get a lot more HST than Prince Edward Island to put into healthcare. And I think we have to try and even that out for sure across the country. So we want to maintain the increase in the Canada Health Transfer at 3%, which is the current Liberal position. But we've just announced in this campaign $1.5 billion for improving diagnostic imaging machines. Because our diagnostic imaging machines are starting to break down, they're getting older, and that's one of the bottlenecks that we have to healthcare service. I should note, I've been waiting a year and a half to get an MRI on my shoulder.
Certainly a tough question, because it's very, very specific, and it looks we are all having a general say about healthcare. So the position of the Green Party is clearly to improve our government-funded universal healthcare system. I had the privilege of having lived in 4 different countries, and according to us Canadians, we are very shy, or we are very sorry we are so shy. We should shout out about our excellent healthcare system compared to other parts of the world. Why? Because it's solidly government-funded. I know other parties are flirting with some privatization issues here and there, but the Green Party stands firm behind securing a federally funded, provincially administrated healthcare system the way it is. That's our promise.
Hi, as a registered nurse and being part of the system, wait times, one of the root causes of wait times is the lack of specialists. So we need to increase the human resource that are specialists in our country and provide, so the federal government would need to provide more resources for the hiring of more specialists to sort of curb the wait time issue. Okay?
I know the provincial government is in the midst of restructuring the healthcare system in Ontario, and I would hope that wait times would be one of the #1 things that they would want to reduce in the province. The federal government, the Liberals, have pledged that if they're re-elected, they're going to invest $6 billion into healthcare across the country. They're going to work with provinces and the territories to implement a national pharmacare program, so that we have some of our most critical drugs covered as part of our healthcare system. And they also want to invest in additional home care, palliative care, and mental health care, which when I go door to door, these are some of the things that I'm hearing are of critical concern to people, and that's our pledge.
This question is for all candidates. If your party were to form the next government, what are the first 5 actions your government would take to combat climate change, and how would those actions be funded?
Boy, that is not a 60-second.
If we're all in agreement, we can bump it up to 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's not a 60-second
Okay.
question.
90 seconds.
90 it is.
All right, still a challenge. A conservative government, #1, we're getting rid of the carbon tax. All it does is take money out of your pocket, does nothing to help the environment. The only way a carbon tax works is if it's so prohibitively expensive that you have to change the way you live your life. So that driving cars doesn't make sense, or heating your home, put it at 60. That's the way it works. It changed your behavior away from emitting carbon because it's too expensive. We have a 3-point plan in the Conservative Party. Number one, we want to invest in technology. Technology is actually going to be the way to try and solve climate change. There's a number of ways of doing that. There's both carbon capture, carbon sequestration, and carbon conversion. So, one of the things that's being developed right now is called a bioreactor. And a bioreactor is full of algae. Algae absorbs carbon at 400 times what a tree or a forest does. So you attach a bioreactor to, for example, a coal-fired electricity plant, and it turns into a zero-emission electricity plant. Technology is the way to do that. Right now, steel accounts for 20% of global carbon emissions. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is partnering with a company in the United States to eliminate CO2 in the production of steel. If we can eliminate 20% through the production of steel through technology, we're going to be well ahead. These are the kinds of things. We're also introducing a home green renovation tax credit so that you can improve the energy efficiency of your home, because homes across Canada account for 20% of emissions in this country. And the final thing is, we have to get the big emitters on side like China and India and Brazil, because if we turned off all our carbon right now, China would use up that space in 6 months.
Well, good people think the same alike. All your technological ideas are absolutely valid. The Green Party stands firmly behind it. You have new technologies, better ideas for renewable energy. Wonderful. But if we have power, we're probably not forming the government. Elizabeth May would make a great prime minister, but probably not. But we could be the balance of power. That's quite conceivable. We have a minority government with a handful or 2 dozens or how many Greens holding balance of power. If we hold the balance of power, that pipeline will not be built, period. Second, we talked about healthcare. The money has to come from somewhere. We're spending $3.3 billion subsidizing an energy sector that is not efficient. That's taxpayers' money going into a dying technology. The biggest enemy of the oil sands is not the Green Party, it's the world market price for oil. In other parts of the world, oil can be produced much more efficiently, much more cheaply, and I must say, I'm cringing now, cleaner. The emissions of our oil sands are about 6-7 times higher than the emissions of the same barrel of oil produced in Saudi Arabia. So these are the 2 critical points Greens will fight for, and we believe this will make really a breakthrough within several months.
Thank you for that question. The NDP would declare a climate emergency, and we would continue with the carbon tax and follow through with the backstop program. We would open a climate accountability office that would ensure that we're measuring and on target the global temperature of not going higher than 1.5 degrees Celsius. We would also move to electrifying our transportation, such as our trains and community vehicles. We would commit to a fleet of, by leading by example, commit to a fleet of ZEVs, well, what I call ZEVs, or zero emission vehicles immediately. This would be paid for by a climate bank, and there would be money invested in that bank for companies that want to transition to carbon-free, fossil-free vehicles, and so our climate bank would be what would pay for this program.
Let's be clear, carbon has a price and pollution is costly, and cleaning up pollution and reducing carbon is also costly. The carbon tax would not have been necessary in Ontario if it weren't for Doug Ford canceling the cap and trade, a system that was working with business,
Boo.
and that brought down, that was working to bring down. Now, the carbon pricing model is not well understood, but if you go down south to the US, it's actually a Republican agenda item. It's a market-driven thing. And basically what it does is it encourages people to change their behavior, and then they're rewarded at the end when they get that money back. In British Columbia, they've had it for 11 years. At the 10-year mark, they did research studies that showed that carbon emissions have come down between 5 and 15% with a net neutral impact on the economy. This is the same in other areas around the world where they've enacted it. So we would keep up the carbon tax or the backstop across Canada. The second thing that we want to do is we want to stimulate innovation and small business and large business